In a small, quiet town in Georgia, there was a woman who everyone knew but hardly anyone really saw. She worked at the local high school, Jefferson High, and her job was simple enough. She served lunch to students every day. Her name was Evelyn Thompson, but most people just called her the lunch lady. To the kids, she was a friendly face behind the counter, always humming a tune or offering a kind word when they were having a tough day. But to many adults in the town, she was just another worker, someone whose job didn't seem all that important. Evelyn had been doing this for years. Every morning, she'd wake up before sunrise, put on her uniform, and head to the school kitchen. There, she'd spend hours chopping vegetables, stirring huge pots of soup, and making sure every tray of food looked just right. It wasn't glamorous work, and the pay wasn't great either, but Evelyn loved it. For her, it wasn't just about feeding hungry teenagers, it was about taking care of them. She knew how hard life could be for some of these kids, and she wanted them to feel even a little bit of warmth during their day, but not everyone appreciated what Evelyn did. Some parents thought she was just the help, someone who didn't deserve much attention. A few teachers whispered jokes about her in the faculty lounge, saying things like, "She probably thinks she's running a five-star restaurant with all that singing and dancing around the kitchen." Even some of the older students made fun of her. They'd imitate the way she moved while cleaning tables or laugh at the songs she sang softly under her breath as she worked. None of this ever seemed to bother Evelyn, though. If anything, she kept smiling through it all. Maybe it was because she knew something no one else did. Behind her calm exterior, Evelyn carried dreams bigger than anyone could imagine. She didn't let the teasing or the lack of respect get to her because she believed in something deeper, something that gave her strength. What most people didn't realize was that Evelyn wasn't just serving meals. She was also creating art. On weekends, when the school was empty and the halls were silent, Evelyn would sit at her kitchen table with a notebook and pen. She wrote poems and lyrics inspired by her life stories about growing up poor in the South, raising two children alone after losing her husband, and finding joy in the smallest moments despite the challenges. Her words were powerful, raw, and deeply personal. Writing became her escape, a way to process everything she'd been through and turn it into something beautiful. One day, while flipping through an old magazine, Evelyn stumbled upon an advertisement for a national talent competition. It was hosted by a big music label looking for new voices. The ad said they were accepting original songs from anyone willing to share their story. At first, Evelyn laughed at the idea. Who would want to hear a song written by a lunch lady? But then she thought about it some more. What if her words could touch someone? What if her voice could inspire others to keep going just like she had? It took her weeks to gather the courage, but eventually Evelyn decided to submit one of her songs. She picked her favorite, a piece about resilience and hope, and mailed it off with trembling hands. She didn't tell anyone what she'd done. Not her coworkers, not her neighbors, and certainly not the kids at school. This was her secret, her chance to prove to herself that her voice mattered. When rumors started spreading around town that Evelyn had entered a singing contest, the reaction was less than supportive. People rolled their eyes and laughed. "The lunch lady thinks she can sing?" One teacher joked during a staff meeting. "What's next? Ballet lessons?" Another chimed in, "Maybe she start performing in the cafeteria." The comments stung, but Evelyn stayed quiet. She reminded herself why she'd sent in her song, to show herself that she was capable of more than what others thought. Deep down, Evelyn didn't expect much to come out of it. She figured her entry would get lost among thousands of others, and that would be the end of it. So she went back to her routine, serving lunches, humming her tunes, and dreaming quietly in her spare time. Little did she know, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. As days turned into weeks, Evelyn tried to forget about the competition. She focused on her work, helping students and keeping the kitchen running smoothly. But inside she couldn't help but wonder, what if? What if someone actually listened to her song? What if they liked it? These thoughts lingered in the back of her mind, giving her a tiny spark of hope each time she walked into the school building. And then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. The principal called Evelyn into his office during lunch prep. Confused, she wiped her hands on her apron and followed him inside. When she entered, she found the entire administrative team gathered around a speakerphone. On the other end was a voice she didn't recognize, a representative from the music label. They congratulated Evelyn on making it to the finals of the competition and invited her to perform her song live at a televised event in New York City. For a moment, Evelyn stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. Then slowly the reality sank in. Everyone in the room erupted into applause, cheering for her like they never had before. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized that this was her moment, a chance to step out of the shadows and let her light shine. From that day forward, nothing would be the same. Evelyn's journey was only beginning, and already she could feel the world opening up to her in ways she'd never dreamed possible. Evelyn's life had always been a mix of hard work, quiet dreams, and moments of beauty that only she seemed to notice. On weekdays, she was the lunch lady, always moving, always busy, making sure every student got their meal with a smile. But on weekends, when the school was empty and silent, Evelyn became someone else entirely. She wasn't just a worker or a caregiver. She was an artist. Every Saturday morning, after finishing her chores, Evelyn would sit at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her favorite notebook. The house was peaceful then, the kind of quiet that let her thoughts flow freely. She'd pick up her pen and start writing, pouring her heart onto the pages. Her poems and songs came from deep within her, shaped by the joys and sorrows of her life. Some were about the struggles she faced as a young girl growing up poor in the South. Others told stories of love and loss, the husband she lost too soon and the 2 children she raised alone. And some were filled with hope, reminding her that even in the darkest times, there was light ahead. Writing wasn't just a hobby for Evelyn, it was her lifeline. It gave her a way to make sense of the world and her place in it. When life felt heavy, putting words on paper made it lighter. She didn't write for fame or recognition, she wrote because it helped her heal. Still, there was a part of her that wondered if anyone else might connect with her words. Would they feel what she felt? Would her songs speak to their hearts? One rainy Sunday afternoon, while flipping through an old magazine she found at a thrift store, Evelyn stumbled upon an advertisement that caught her eye. It was for a national talent competition hosted by a big music label. They were looking for original songs from people who wanted to share their story. At first, Evelyn laughed softly to herself. Who would want to hear a song written by someone like me, she thought. But the idea stuck with her. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, Evelyn pulled out her notebook and read through her songs again. One stood out, a piece she had written called Through the Storm. It was about finding strength. When everything around you seems to be falling apart, the lyrics spoke of resilience, courage, and the power of hope. As she read them aloud, she felt a lump rise in her throat. This was her story, but it was also a universal one. Maybe, just maybe, someone else needed to hear it. Submitting her song wasn't easy. Evelyn wrestled with doubt for weeks. What if they rejected her? Worse, what if they laughed at her? She imagined the ridicule she'd face if anyone found out. Finally, one evening, she decided to take the leap. She carefully copied the lyrics onto fresh paper, packaged them neatly, and mailed them off. Her hands trembled as she dropped the envelope into the mailbox, but she felt a strange sense of peace afterward. She had done it. Whatever happened next was out of her control. Weeks went by, and Evelyn tried not to think about it too much. She threw herself into her work at the school, serving lunches and chatting with students like always. But whispers began to spread. Someone must have seen her mailing the package or heard her talking about it, because soon enough, rumors started circulating. People joked about the lunch lady trying to be a singer. Teachers snickered in the break room, saying things like, "Maybe we should charge admission to watch her perform." Even some of the older students joined in, mimicking her movements and pretending to belt out imaginary ballads in the cafeteria. Evelyn heard the laughter, of course. How could she not? But instead of letting it crush her, she reminded herself why she had sent in her song. This wasn't about proving anything to them, it was about proving something to herself. She wanted to show that her voice mattered, that her story deserved to be heard. So she kept smiling, kept working, and kept believing. Then one day, something unexpected happened. A group of younger students approached her during lunchtime. They weren't part of the popular crowd, just regular kids who often sat together at a corner table. One of them shyly asked, "Is it true you entered a singing contest?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. Then she nodded. "Yes, I did," she said softly. "Why do you ask?" The kids exchanged glances before one of them replied, "We think that's really cool. You're brave." Those simple words hit Evelyn like a wave. For the first time since submitting her song, she realized that not everyone saw her as a joke. These kids who probably knew what it felt like to be overlooked themselves, thought she was brave. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to her. As the weeks passed, Evelyn returned to her routine, focusing on her job and her family. She didn't expect to hear back from the competition. After all, thousands of people must have entered, and what were the chances they'd pick someone like her? Still, there was a tiny flicker of hope inside her that refused to go out. Every now and then, she'd catch herself imagining what it would be like to stand on a stage, sharing her song with the world, but most days she pushed those thoughts aside. Life went on as usual. She cooked meals, cleaned tables, and greeted students with her warm smile. No one suspected that beneath her calm exterior, Evelyn was waiting and hoping for something extraordinary to happen. Little did she know her wait was almost over. Something incredible was coming her way, something that would change her life forever. All she had to do was hold on to her faith a little longer. Evelyn's days continued much like they always had. She woke up early, got dressed in her uniform, and headed to the school kitchen. The smell of frying onions and baking bread filled the air as she worked alongside her coworkers, chatting about their weekends or sharing stories about their families. To anyone watching, it seemed like just another ordinary week for the lunch lady, but Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Ever since she'd mailed off her song, a small part of her had been holding its breath, waiting to see if anything would happen. She told herself not to get her hopes up. After all, how likely was it that a simple woman from a small town would catch the attention of a big music label? Yet, deep down, she couldn't help but wonder, what if the morning everything changed started out like any other? Evelyn arrived at school before sunrise, just as she always did. She unlocked the kitchen door, turned on the lights, and began prepping for the day's meals. As she chopped vegetables and stirred pots of soup, her mind wandered to the lyrics of "Through the Storm." The words felt alive in her head, almost as if they were urging her to believe in herself just a little bit more. By mid-morning, the cafeteria was bustling with students grabbing trays and lining up for food. Evelyn greeted them with her usual warmth, handing out slices of pizza and ladling steaming bowls of chili. It wasn't until lunchtime ended and the kitchen quieted down that the principal called her into his office. Confused, Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and followed him inside. When she entered the room, she was surprised to find the entire administrative staff gathered around a speakerphone. Some looked serious, others seemed excited. The principal gestured for her to sit down, then cleared his throat. "Evelyn," he said, "we have someone on the line who wants to speak with you." Her heart skipped a beat. Who could it be? A parent? A supplier? Before she could ask, a voice came through the speakerphone, clear, professional, and full of enthusiasm. "Hello, Miss Thompson? This is Amanda from Starlight Records. First, let me say congratulations. Your submission has made it to the finals of our national talent competition." For a moment, Evelyn thought she hadn't heard correctly. Her submission? Finals? She blinked, trying to process the words. Then it hit her like a bolt of lightning. They were talking about her song, the one she'd poured her soul into, the one she'd sent off with trembling hands and zero expectations. "We'd love for you to come to New York City to perform your Peace Live at our televised event next month," Amanda continued. "How does that sound?" Evelyn sat there, stunned, her mouth open, but no words came out. Tears welled up in her eyes as the weight of what was happening sank in. Everyone in the room erupted into applause, cheering for her like they never had before. Even the principal, usually so reserved, clapped loudly, a huge grin spreading across his face. I don't know what to say, Evelyn stammered finally, her voice shaking. Thank you. As the call ended and the room settled back into silence, Evelyn felt overwhelmed. For years, she'd been invisible to so many people, the butt of jokes, the subject of whispers. And now, here she was, being celebrated by the very same people who had once dismissed her. It was surreal, almost too much to take in. Later that afternoon, word spread quickly through the school. Teachers who had mocked her now rushed to congratulate her. Students who barely noticed her before stopped by the cafeteria to offer hugs and well wishes. Even the janitor, who rarely spoke to anyone, patted her on the shoulder and said, "You've got this, Evelyn." At first, Evelyn found it hard to reconcile the sudden attention with the way things used to be. Part of her wanted to hold on to her doubts, to remind herself that she was still the same person she'd always been. But another part of her, a stronger, braver part, knew that she deserved this moment. She had worked hard, stayed true to herself, and taken a leap of faith when no one believed in her. Now she was reaping the rewards over the next few days. Preparations began for Evelyn's trip to New York. The school community rallied around her, offering support in ways she never expected. One teacher helped her pick out an outfit for the performance, while another volunteered to babysit her grandchildren so she wouldn't have to worry about them while she was away. Parents chipped in to cover her travel expenses, and some even organized a surprise send-off party in the gymnasium. On the night of the party, Evelyn stood in front of a crowd of cheering students, teachers, and neighbors. Balloons and streamers decorated the walls, and a banner hung above the stage that read, "We're proud of you, Evelyn." Speeches were given, laughter filled the air, and tears flowed freely. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. "I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I never imagined I'd be standing here like this, surrounded by so much love and encouragement. For a long time I doubted myself. I thought my dreams were too big, too impossible. But now I know that sometimes all it takes is believing in yourself even when no one else does." Her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. Many nodded along, thinking about their own struggles and aspirations. By the end of her speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Evelyn left the stage to thunderous applause, feeling more supported and loved than she ever had in her life. As the days leading up to her performance slipped by, Evelyn spent hours practicing her song. She sang it softly in the shower, hummed it while cooking dinner, and rehearsed in front of her mirror late at night. Each time she sang, she poured her heart into it, letting the emotions flow freely. She knew this was her chance to share her story not just with the judges, but with the world. Finally, the day of her departure arrived. With her suitcase packed and her nerves buzzing, Evelyn boarded a plane for the first time in her life. As the aircraft soared into the sky, she gazed out the window at the clouds below, marveling at how far she'd come. From the humble kitchens of Jefferson High School to the bright lights of New York City, she was ready to step onto the biggest stage of her life. What awaited her in the city was unknown. But one thing was certain: Evelyn was no longer the woman she used to be. She had transformed not because of fame or recognition, but because she had dared to dream. And as the skyline of Manhattan came into view, she smiled, knowing that whatever happened next, she had already won. The flight to New York City was a whirlwind of emotions for Evelyn. She had never been on a plane before, let alone traveled to such a big, bustling city. As the aircraft climbed higher and higher, she pressed her face against the window, watching as the world below turned into a patchwork of green fields and winding rivers. Her heart raced with excitement, but also with nerves. What if she froze on stage? What if her voice cracked or she forgot the lyrics? These thoughts swirled in her mind, but she pushed them aside, reminding herself why she was doing this: to share her story, not to be perfect. When the plane touched down in New York, Evelyn stepped off feeling like she'd landed on another planet. The city buzzed with energy, its streets crowded with people rushing in every direction. Towering buildings stretched up to the clouds, their windows reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. Everything about it felt overwhelming, yet thrilling at the same time. A car sent by the competition organizers picked her up from the airport and whisked her away to a cozy hotel near Times Square. The hotel room was nicer than anything Evelyn had ever stayed in. There was a soft bed piled high with pillows, a mini fridge, stocked with snacks and a view of the glittering city skyline. For a moment she stood there, taking it all in, wondering how her life had led her here, from serving meals in a school cafeteria to staying in a fancy hotel in one of the most famous cities in the world. It was surreal, almost like a dream. The next morning, Evelyn attended a rehearsal at the theater where the competition would take place. The venue was massive, with rows upon rows of plush red seats and a grand stage that seemed to stretch forever. Backstage, contestants milled around, practicing their routines and chatting nervously. Some were young singers fresh out of college, while others were seasoned performers hoping for their big break. Evelyn couldn't help but feel out of place among them. They looked so polished and confident, dressed in designer clothes and carrying expensive instruments. Meanwhile, she wore a simple blouse and jeans, her hands clasped tightly together as she tried to calm her racing heart. A staff member approached her and introduced himself as Greg, her assigned coach for the day. He was kind and patient, helping her run through her song several times to make sure she felt comfortable. "You've got something special," he told her after one practice run. "Don't lose sight of that when you're out there." His words stuck with her. Special. That wasn't a word Evelyn used to describe herself very often. But maybe, just maybe, it was true. As the hours ticked by, Evelyn found herself growing more and more anxious. She kept replaying worst-case scenarios in her head, tripping on stage, forgetting the lyrics, or being booed off by the audience. To distract herself, she wandered around the theater during breaks, exploring its hidden corners and marveling at the intricate details of its design. In one hallway, she stumbled upon a wall covered in framed photos of past performers. Some faces were familiar artists she'd heard on the radio, but most were strangers. Each photo told a story, capturing a moment when someone had dared to step into the spotlight and chase their dreams. Standing there, Evelyn realized she was now part of that legacy. Whether she won or lost, she was making history in her own small way. Finally, the night of the performance arrived. Evelyn spent hours getting ready, helped by a team of stylists who fussed over her hair, makeup, and outfit. When they were done, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Gone was the lunch lady in her uniform. In her place stood a radiant woman wearing a flowing dress borrowed from a local boutique back home. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup highlighted her warm smile. She looked elegant, poised, and ready to shine. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Contestants paced nervously, whispering prayers under their breath or stretching to loosen their muscles. Evelyn sat quietly in a corner, clutching her hands together and murmuring a silent prayer of her own. She thought about her late husband, her children, and the students she served every day. Their faces gave her strength, reminding her of why she was here, not for fame, but to inspire others to believe in themselves. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. The host announced her name, and the curtain rose. Evelyn walked onto the stage, blinking under the bright lights as the audience erupted into polite applause. For a split second, fear gripped her. What if she failed? What if no one cared? But then she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. Her voice filled the auditorium, rich and soulful, carrying the weight of every struggle and triumph she had ever known. The lyrics of "Through the Storm" flowed effortlessly, painting vivid pictures of resilience, love, and hope. As she sang, Evelyn poured her entire heart into the performance, letting go of all her doubts and fears. She wasn't thinking about the judges or the cameras anymore. She was singing for herself, for her community, and for anyone who had ever felt invisible, and the audience felt it. You could see it in their faces. Some leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the raw emotion in her voice. Others wiped away tears, moved by the honesty of her words. By the time she reached the final note, the entire theater was on its feet, cheering and clapping wildly. Evelyn stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the response. Then, slowly, she smiled a genuine, heartfelt smile and bowed her head in gratitude. After the show, Evelyn was surrounded by well-wishers backstage. Other contestants congratulated her, saying things like, "That was incredible, and you gave us goosebumps." Even the judges, who had initially seemed intimidating, praised her for her authenticity and passion. One of them said, "Your song reminded us why music matters. It connects us, heals us, and gives us hope." Evelyn returned to her hotel that night feeling lighter than she had in years. She didn't win the competition. The trophy went to a young pop singer with a dazzling voice and choreographed dance moves, but she didn't care. Winning had never been the point. What mattered was that she had stepped out of the shadows and shown the world who she truly was. Back in her hometown, news of Evelyn's performance spread like wildfire. Clips of her singing went viral online, racking up millions of views within days. People from all over the country commented on how powerful her voice was and how her story inspired them to chase their own dreams. Locally, the reaction was equally profound. Parents who had once dismissed her as just the lunch lady apologized for their ignorance. Teachers who had mocked her now spoke of her with admiration. And the students she served every day? They couldn't stop talking about how proud they were of her. One afternoon, a group of kids surprised Evelyn by showing up at the school kitchen with handmade signs that read, "We love you, Evelyn, and our lunch lady is a star." Their smiles were infectious, and Evelyn found herself laughing and crying at the same time. It was a reminder that her journey wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who needed a little hope, a little courage to keep going. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn became a symbol of perseverance and self-belief. The school renamed its annual arts festival in her honor, and she started mentoring young aspiring artists in her community. She encouraged them to pursue their passions without fear of judgment, sharing her own story as proof that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Looking back, Evelyn realized that the laughter and ridicule she had faced hadn't broken her. They had made her stronger. They had taught her to listen harder to her own heart and to the whispers of possibility that lingered in the air. And now, standing tall as a woman who had once been dismissed but had risen above it, she knew one thing for certain. Sometimes all it takes is courage to change your life forever. Evelyn's life didn't change overnight after her performance in New York, but it did shift in ways that mattered most inside. She returned home to Jefferson High School with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. The applause from the theater still echoed in her ears, not because she craved fame, but because it reminded her of what was possible when you dared to step out of your comfort zone. For years, she had been content staying in the background, quietly serving meals and humming her songs to herself. Now, she realized that her voice, not just the one on stage, but the one within her heart, was meant to be heard. The town had transformed during her absence. People who once overlooked her now greeted her with wide smiles and warm hugs. Parents stopped by the cafeteria just to thank her for inspiring their kids. Teachers invited her to speak at assemblies where students sat spellbound as she shared her journey. "I'm no different than I was before," Evelyn would say, standing in front of the crowd. "I still cook food, clean tables, and sing my little tunes, but something inside me woke up when I decided to believe in myself, and I want each of you to know that you can do the same." Her words resonated deeply, especially with the younger generation. In a world full of uncertainty, Evelyn became a beacon of hope. Kids who felt invisible or underestimated saw themselves in her story. They began approaching her after school, shyly asking for advice or simply wanting to share their dreams. One boy told her he wanted to become a writer but feared his stories weren't good enough. Another girl confided that she loved painting but worried about being teased for it. Evelyn listened patiently to each of them, offering gentle encouragement. "Don't let fear stop you," she'd say. "You have something special inside you. Trust that." Inspired by these conversations, Evelyn decided to take things a step further. With the support of the school administration, she started an after-school program called Dream Big. Every Friday afternoon, students gathered in the cafeteria-turned-art space to write poetry, paint murals, and perform skits. Evelyn acted as both mentor and cheerleader, guiding them through creative exercises while reminding them to embrace their unique talents. Over time, the program grew so popular that parents and teachers joined in too, turning it into a community-wide effort. One evening, as Evelyn tidied up the art supplies after a particularly lively session, she overheard two students talking outside the door. "Do you think we could ever do something like Ms. Evelyn did?" One asked hesitantly, "Like actually make our dreams come true?" The other replied without hesitation, "If she can do it, why can't we?" Those words stayed with Evelyn. Long after the room emptied, she realized that her impact went beyond just sharing her own story. It was about planting seeds of possibility in others. Her courage had sparked a chain reaction, encouraging people to dream bigger and bolder than they ever thought possible. Despite all the attention and praise, Evelyn remained humble. She continued working in the cafeteria, serving meals with the same warmth and care she always had. To her, this was more than just a job. It was her way of giving back to the community that had shaped her. But now there was an added layer of joy in everything she did. Students lined up eagerly to chat with her, often bringing scraps of paper filled with lyrics or sketches they hoped she'd critique. Even the snarky seniors who used to tease her apologized sincerely, admitting they'd misjudged her. "We're sorry for laughing at you," one of them said one day. "You showed us what real strength looks like." As months turned into years, Evelyn's influence spread far beyond the town. Clips of her performance kept circulating online, reaching new audiences and inspiring countless people around the globe. Letters poured in from strangers, teachers, factory workers, stay-at-home parents, all saying the same thing: "Your story made me believe in myself again." Some even sent recordings of themselves singing through the storm, adding their own twist to her melody. It was humbling, overwhelming, and beautiful all at once. To honor her contributions, the school officially renamed its arts festival the Evelyn Thompson Celebration of Courage. Each year, students showcased their talents, singing, dancing, acting, painting in front of proud families and friends. The event became a highlight of the school calendar, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and media coverage from local news outlets. Evelyn always attended, sitting quietly in the audience, clapping enthusiastically for every performer. When someone inevitably shouted, "That's the lunch lady," she'd wave bashfully, never growing tired of the love and admiration. But perhaps the most meaningful change happened closer to home. Evelyn's grandchildren, who had once seen her only as Grandma, the woman who baked cookies and told funny stories, now looked at her with awe. "You're kind of famous, huh?" Her eldest granddaughter teased one day. Evelyn laughed, brushing off the comment. "Famous? No, just lucky enough to find my voice." Her children, too, noticed the difference. They marveled at how their mother had blossomed, shedding any lingering doubts she might have carried for decades. "Mom, you've always been amazing," her daughter said one evening over dinner. "But now you finally see it." It wasn't just Evelyn's life that improved. The entire town seemed to thrive under her quiet leadership. Inspired by her example, neighbors came together to organize fundraisers, volunteer projects, and cultural events. Art galleries popped up in empty storefronts, music festivals filled the park on weekends, and book clubs formed in living rooms across the community. Jefferson High School became known not just for its academics but also for its vibrant arts scene. Legacy Evelyn had unknowingly sparked, looking back on her journey. Evelyn often reflected on the laughter and ridicule she had faced early on. Those moments hadn't broken her, they had forged her. They taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of believing in herself even when others didn't. And though she had achieved more than she ever dreamed, what brought her the greatest joy was knowing she had touched lives. One sunny afternoon, as she stood in the school kitchen chopping vegetables, a young girl approached her. She couldn't have been older than 8, clutching a notebook tightly against her chest. "Miss Evelyn?" she asked timidly. "Can I show you?" My poem? Evelyn smiled, setting down her knife. Of course, sweetheart. Let's hear it. The girl hesitated for a moment, then began reading softly, her voice trembling but determined. As Evelyn listened, tears pricked her eyes. This was why she had stepped onto that stage, to remind people like this little girl that their voices mattered, that no matter where they came from or what others thought of them, they could shine. When the child finished, Evelyn hugged her tightly. That was beautiful, she whispered. Never stop writing. And as the girl skipped away, beaming with pride, Evelyn knew her work wasn't done. There were still hearts to uplift, dreams to nurture, and stories waiting to be told. Hers was just one chapter in a much larger tale, a story of courage, connection, and the power of believing in yourself.